Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Tim Austin, and you're listening to Navigate. You know, lasting change often comes by way of desperation. And there is freedom that comes through acknowledging where we are stuck and admitting our need and leaning into the process of discovery and growth which God has for each one of us. And today we have someone on the show who has lived this out. So you're in for a real treat, and I trust this conversation both challenges and encourages you. Char Blair is a gifted communicator. Her witty sense of humor and willingness to speak truth from God's word into real-life situations are just the beginning of her many God-given gifts and abilities. And she's an ordained minister within the Assemblies of God, Northern California, Nevada district, where she has served for the past 20 years. And she's recently accepted a new position within the district as Director of Church Ministries. This new position allows Char to fulfill her desire of helping people find their niche within the kingdom, team building, and speaking to the next generation. She is a graduate of William Jessup University, receiving her degree in Counseling and Biblical Theology. And her favorite pastime is spoiling her two nephews, niece and new grandniece, and cuddling her puppies and riding her motorcycle. So let's jump into my recent conversation with Char Blair. Okay, well, hey, welcome to Navigate, Char. I'm really, really excited that we can have this conversation today and look forward to what we're going to be talking about. And sometimes we're not sure where it's going to go, but I'm always delighted in how God leads these conversations. So just thanks. Yeah. Thanks for joining me.
Me too. You're welcome. I'm excited for the adventure that's ahead. Where we're going to go. Yeah.
Yes, it can be like an adventure. these conversations there, or hopefully not too many rabbit trails, but we'll see. Rabbit trails are good too.
Right? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Good.
So tell my listeners, and just kind of something about yourself, a little bit about you, what may be unique or even mysterious, or maybe even something you're most proud of. Just something about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'll start with something quirky, and then I'll talk about what I'm most proud of. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
So, one of my quirks in life that I've had to, overcome is probably I'm a dog with a bone on stuff. So I can get real obsessive on things and real OCD-ish. So over my life, I've always struggled with anxiety to a certain level, but I've had OCD as like a there's a difference between having the personality and then the disorder, and so I'm blessed to have both. And so while the disorder is pretty much under control and pretty non-existent in my life, the personality still remains. And so I like things a certain way. And so the quirky thing about me is one of the things is I like to have my kitchen cleaned up at night. And for years, I know this sounds so weird, but for years I had towels with the day of the week on them so that the next morning I got up and I used the Tuesday towel on Tuesday because I knew if it had Tuesday on it, it was a clean towel. Because I always want to start the day out with a clean kitchen towel. Right. It's just, that's just a positive thing in life, I think. And so my sister and I are complete opposites. And so...
Wait, you weren't roommates, were you?
Yes, growing up as kids. Yeah, it was like the odd couple,
it
was like the odd couple, Here I am over, on a Saturday. And it's so funny, though, because people talk about how they can't listen to secular music because it takes them back to, some Christians, you'll hear them talk about, I can't listen to certain songs because it takes me back to when I was doing this and I was doing drugs. And I'm like, well, I can. I was vacuuming my room listening to that song. It's kind of funny. So I was, the kid who cleaned, and people would literally come over to the house and I'd be like, hey, can I clean your tennis shoes? I mean, I cleaned everything. And so it was just a weird thing I had. But my sister will come and visit me, and one night, it was a Monday night, and I'm in my bedroom, and we'd said goodnight, and then I hear her in the kitchen, and I'd already set out the Tuesday towel. And And I hear her in there washing her hands. And I'm like, oh no, she's using the Tuesday towel on a Monday night. Yeah. So that's just my quirks. Right, it's probably a good thing I'm single. If I was married, I'd probably drive my husband absolutely nuts. I think the thing I'm most proud of is just being the consistency in my life and faithfulness. That's evident in even me being here at the office for 21 years. October, I was here. Yeah, in October, I celebrated 21 years of being at the District Resource Center. I started in the mailroom, and I hung in there.
Yeah.
There were times when it was difficult, when people would come up to me and they would say things like, "Man, God has such big things for you." They'd hear me speak at a conference or whatever. And they would say, "God has so many great things in store for you." And Char, now, are you still an admin? And that little word "still," meant so much to me. Yeah. It meant, like, in my mind, it was like as though they said, "Now, why haven't you, church planted or built a multi-million-dollar ministry? Or why aren't you, healing people in Africa of, diseases?" And I would put all this weight on myself. And God was like, no, Char, that's not, it's okay to be faithful. Yeah. It doesn't maybe look, sometimes people will look at it and say, "Oh, she's just comfortable," but really it was where God had me, and I needed to learn the lessons that I needed to learn in that season. So,
but there had to be times that you just were wondering, when is this, whatever you would call it, for lack of a better word, promotion, or what are you going to do with?
Sure.
What are the next steps, Lord?
I mean, all the time. I would, and I cried. I remember, I think it was Alicia Sholey came out with a book called Anonymous, and Dr. Sam got it for me and gave it to me, and he handed it to me, and I remember thinking, I'm not going to read this. I'm living it. Are you kidding me? And so there was definitely areas of bitterness, of God, you've called me to be a minister, and here I am, serving big mixed nuts to the district presbytery. When do I get my turn? And they're having me make the coffee because I'm a woman. That's how I always felt, and that wasn't how it was, but that's how I felt, that I was relegated to things that were beneath me, stuff like serving. Right,
stuff like serving. Just wanted maybe just to around that whole, and the whole kind of anonymous piece, because there's I know firsthand, there's a lot of my listeners out there that are, maybe they're in really hard places.
Sure.
They may, I have a lot of overseas listeners because we were missionaries, and missionaries have connected with the podcast and stuff. So I'm thinking just like singles, moms, especially women, but not only women, but especially women out there on the mission field that just feel like, I'm anonymous. Or, man, what would you say to those kinds of people that are just feeling stuck or lonely or, anonymous, like no one sees me, or...
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I recently heard someone talking in regards to their marriage. They said they had stayed married for so long because they stayed on the bus because they knew the scenery would eventually change. And having that mentality of I'm going to go somewhere just because the grass looks greener never really pans out. I really knew that God was saying, there's this reward for faithfulness. And so kind of like the whole Mother Teresa thing when she said, God hasn't called me to be successful, he's called me to be faithful. And I really believe that when you're faithful, there is a success that happens. And it's not going to look like what the world calls success, but there's a respect that you gain from people because you have stick-to-itiveness. You have the ability to stick with it, even when it's really, really, really hard and you want to quit. But yet there was this point inside me where I still, you never climb so high on the leadership ladder that you can't get to take off your apron as a servant. And so I still had these incredible opportunities, but what I found was that when I would think it was about the position, how do I say this? It was almost like I had to grow in other areas outside of what I was doing as well. So I always thought it was about the position, that like, oh man, I'm an admin, which in my mind was always like a better term of saying secretary back in the day. And, but yet I also knew that God had called me to start speaking. So I started working on that vein. And when I began to go out and speak more, and because I knew I loved communicating, when I began to do that, then I wasn't so concerned about being an admin, because I was being fulfilled in both areas. So I was able to serve, but I was also able to speak. And so being able to find a different, nowadays they call it a side hustle. I don't really like that term so much, but being able to find that outlet for your gift, even if it's not right now in your current position where you're having to make money, being able to find that outlet is huge. And it was huge for me. Yeah. And the two were great. They married each other, Right. So here I was, I'm so grateful. I look back and I go, oh man, here I was sitting in a building that allowed me to be able to intermingle with so many wonderful leaders that were coming through my office, and, they were able to meet with me, and then it would become, hey, well, what are you doing next Sunday? We need a speaker type thing. That's great. It worked perfect for me.
So there's a lot to be said too in your case of when you're in the mailroom or whatever, you're in that kind of behind the scenes kind of place. Still, it takes intentionality to pursue the thing you're passionate about.
Oh yeah.
For you it was speaking and communication.
Sure.
And
to always keep growing no matter where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Awesome. What energizes you? What keeps you motivated in terms of your personal, professional life? Kind of what makes you want to get up in the morning?
Well, I love to learn stuff. I just do. I love, like Dr. Sam will even tell you, like, I love being a maven. I love, I try to be an early adapter when it comes to anything like technology wise, what's going on. So I love to learn. So I think that's the thing that wakes me up in the morning is I'm going to be like, what am I going to learn today when I get to the office? When I stop, we all go through times where we're more motivated than other seasons, when it's colder outside, I find I'm less motivated. Yeah. Right? In the wintertime. Right. But I just constantly am like, what am I going to learn? And then what do I get to give away that I've learned today? So, everything in life is these debits and credits. And so, especially relationships. And so being able to say, oh man, I get to, the thing that I love right now is being able to have such a wide pool of leaders that I get to work with, that I just get to do something really kind for someone. Whether it's writing them a note, sending them a gift, any little thing to be able to make that leader's day is the thing. Man, I love that probably more than anything. The whole networking thing, and then putting people that belong together. Like if I'm at an event and this person over here is doing this type of ministry, and I know that they are going to be able to collaborate with this, I love being able to do that. That's the whole networking. That's my thing, man. That's my jam.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. And the whole kind of, what am I going to learn today kind of puts you in that receiving mode, right?
Yeah. And it's staying curious.
Yeah. But then there's the giving piece, whereas you're actually looking for someone to encourage, write a note or do something. So it just, to me, it speaks of a way to not become stagnant, right? You're actually receiving and you're giving out of that.
Yeah. And then just knowing the boundaries of, especially on the giving part, and just saying, okay, now I'm done.
Yeah.
And then going through seasons where I've noticed that I go through these seasons where I take a lot of stuff and I just pour into myself, and I'm reading this and I'm listening to this podcast. And then it's almost like you go through a season where it germinates inside you, and then you get hungry and you want more. Yeah. And so just understanding how your body works, how you take input, information coming in,
right.
and then also sending it out, and just knowing that it is a cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay.
And that's all right.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Cool.
Sure.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about transition on this podcast. That's just kind of, I guess, maybe you talked about side hustles. I guess it used to be my side hustle.
Yeah.
Now it's more of my main thing. But and I often say that transition is transformational. It can be, has the potential to be transformational. So
sure.
Tell me about a transitional, so maybe a pivotal seasons in your life, a particular one that stands out to you that was really how did that change you? What kind of transformation did you see in your own life, and how much is due to the transition itself, or the twists and turns that you navigated in that season?
Sure. I think, if you were to look at and say, what are some of the biggest transitions in my life? About a year and a half ago, just the promotion to the position I'm currently in as the Director of Church Ministries, going from, working in the workroom 21 years ago to then going to an executive admin, to going from an admin to an executive admin, then becoming an executive admin, and then becoming Director of Church Ministries. It's been a huge transition for me. But I believe that the transformation that started 6 years ago was the pivotal point for me. And actually in April, it will be 7 years. I was at a point in my life where I was very unmotivated. I believe I was very depressed. I had such high anxiety that I started going to an anxiety specialist. And she began talking to me about all these different areas in my life. And I didn't like that, A lot of times as Pentecostal people, we think we've got the corner on the market. Like, I can't, I speak in tongues. I can't struggle with that. And, right? And so these were just some things in my life that I couldn't rebuke away, And one of the areas that she began to talk to me about was my weight. And so at the time, I was probably about 115 pounds heavier than I am now. I'm 5'3", and I was weighing in at, I think it was my highest was 237 pounds. When you're 237 pounds, you're 5'3", and you're not the heavyweight champion of the world, there's some definite issues going on. And so I was making choices in regards to how I was handling my anxiety. And so I remember her saying to me one day, I said to her, I've come to see you about my anxiety, but you keep talking about all these other things, and it's giving me more anxiety. I don't think this is helping me. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to be a whole person." And that just began to stab me in the heart. And I was like, "Oh, great. You cut me up and now I have to pay you for this." But it really put me on a course of saying, Char, you have to change. And I love what some people, how they define God as the, G-O-D, as the gift of desperation. And it was a beautiful place. Being desperate is such a beautiful place. And it's also very freeing, because you realize that you'll do whatever it takes. And so I just began I would get on my knees every night for about 2 weeks. And I would just say, God, I've tried everything. And it really, of course, it wasn't about food. It was about how I was acting out with food. And I found myself, praying on my knees every night by the side of my bed. And I would go through the things that I've tried. I would say, God, I've tried this and this and this and this and this, and they haven't worked. Would you please help me find a solution? I know you have the answers, and I'm ready. So I didn't pray the "May I wake up in the morning thin" prayer, which we've all prayed, right? In some form of desperation. Oh God, if you do this for me. Right. The Hail Mary prayer. It was more like, okay, God, I'll walk the process. It was, I was on my knees with, crying uncle. And I found a program that's worked for me, and it's been 6 years of being free. And so I look at that now, because it took me about a year to get the weight off. And I look at that and I go, wow, if I hadn't gone through that transformation back there and started working on Char, because it was a keystone habit for me that then led to a bunch of other habits for the transformation. It wasn't one large transformation. It was these little itty bitty small changes that I made on a daily basis.
Walk the process.
I had to walk the process. Yeah. And that's, I believe, what led to then the invitation to, hey, would you be our Director of Church Ministries? Because, you know, how we are on the outside is actually our visual resume to the world.
Right.
And I was showing on the outside how unhealthy my inside was. And I was. There was several areas of my life that were unmanageable. And I remember even with the counselor when we talked about it, I remember leaving the meeting, calling a friend saying, hey, I need to talk. I just felt devastated. You know, she had just basically told me I was a mess. And I think it wasn't that she told me, it was I finally recognized it in myself, how messy I was. And here I was out speaking and traveling, but yet I wasn't, so to speak, excuse the expression, I wasn't smoking what I was selling. And, you know, when you're telling someone, hey, this is how you should live and you should walk in freedom and all these kinds of things, but yet you're bound up in so many different areas in your life. Yeah. You're not living true. You're not living true to who you know you want to be. And so I called a friend and I said, hey, I just feel devastated. I said, would you meet me so we can go talk? And I said, let's go meet at Olive Garden because I just need to go eat. But that was the beginning of so much change for me. Yeah. And so, you know, I got healthier in my relationship to food. I got healthier in my relationship to money, and healthier in my relationships, period. And so, the healthier you are, you get a new group of friends. Good. You know, and you surround yourself with different people. Good. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's an intentional choice too.
Yes, completely. Right? Oh yeah.
Wow. So there is with going back to transition. Yeah. You know, what I hear you saying in your case, there was this kind of pivotal moment, you know, for, you know, maybe there was more than one, but you mentioned this whole, you know, the counselor saying, I thought you wanted to be whole.
Yes.
And that sounded like a pivotal
that was huge for me, of the reality that I wasn't. You know, and I knew that there were areas in my life that were broken, but man, you know, denial is such a hard thing. And, but I was ready, you know, I was so desperate. I was ready, you know, and I was having so much anxiety because of, so much of what I was feeding on, so to speak. I believe, you know, I wasn't healthy in what I was putting in my body, how I was handling boundaries. I didn't have boundaries. I didn't have boundaries around my work. I didn't have boundaries around my relationships. And so, all of that culminated into, you know, it comes out in one form or another. And mine was, you know, it was kind of like whack-a-mole. It was coming out in a whole bunch of areas, in the way I ate, in the way I spent money, in relationships that weren't emotionally healthy. You know, it was coming, you know, the dam had broke, so to speak.
Yeah. And so God was saying, hey, this is not one of those places you're just going to rebuke it away, but it's going to be a process, and I'm going to walk with you through that process.
Yeah, totally. You know, exactly. And I had grown up, you know, growing up in the church is that you handled everything at the altar, which is great spiritually in saying, yes, I need help, but it didn't leave me with now what do I do Monday morning? Right. It left me with, okay, I've asked the Lord to help me, but I don't really have to rely on anybody else. And so now I had to learn how to actually get help. Yeah. And so I was desperate enough to get help. Yeah. Yeah.
So how long was this process to where you can now, you know, if you look back on it, from that moment of kind of just the wake up call piece, and then to where you felt like, wow, I'm here now. I'm in this whole place, you know, and of course we're always in process, but to where you could really.
Sure.
Yeah.
Man. Well, it's been, I went into my very first 12-step food recovery meeting, 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I learned a whole different language. And so I got a whole new toolbox. And for a while I was kind of like, man, why didn't I learn this in the church? And I'm realizing that I did. It was just different lingo.
Yeah.
And so the nice thing about 12-step is I could go in and I could just be Char, and I wasn't like Char the speaker, Char the Assemblies of God minister, Char the whatever. I was just Char.
Yeah.
And so, the 12 steps were actually founded out of, AA was founded out of the Oxford group, which was a very, was based on the principles of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so it just culminated with what I already believed. And I just watched this transformation slowly but surely. And then when I began to see health in one area, and one of the things that was so foundational for me, and I know this seems so petty, but one of the things that they would have me eat for my breakfast, I absolutely hated. It was non-fat plain yogurt. I mean, have you ever tasted non-fat plain yogurt?
I don't think so.
It's like drinking buttermilk. Have you ever drank buttermilk? Some people like that stuff. Yeah. I remember I got buttermilk one day and I thought I had got the wrong milk and it was soured.
Yeah, I literally,
batter. Yeah, I just spit it out. I was outside and I took a drink. And so all of a sudden here I'm having to eat this breakfast of, they were having me eat because you had to be accountable.
Right.
And so they gave you what you were to eat. And so they said, okay, we want you to have an ounce of oatmeal and we want you to have 8 ounces of non-fat plain yogurt. And I think my very first time I had breakfast, I cried because I was just like, are you kidding me? And then I've got to eat this the rest of my life. And of course, in 12-step, they tell you don't talk to yourself like that. Say just for today, right? Mm-hmm. But I was like, the jig is up. I know what's going on here, folks. And so the day I knew that transformation was happening in a very practical way was the day that I began to love non-fat plain yogurt. And I was able to say to myself, if my taste buds can change, I can change. That's good. If something as small as my taste buds can change, I can change. Yeah. And so then when you do hard things in life, it helps your self-esteem. Mm-hmm. And so being able to do something hard, which only 2% of the people in the world who have over 100 pounds to lose actually keep their weight off. Only 2%.
Only 2. Wow.
And so being able to say, you know what, I can do, with God's grace, every day, I can do something hard. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
And then I think to myself, okay, if God can help me change my taste buds, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
The sky's the limit. I can change in all ways.
And I can see that whole mindset shift happening, just saying.
Completely.
The next thing that's up, for change on your agenda or God's agenda, you can almost start looking at those differently, right? Like, this is, I'm going to take this challenge on,
Yeah. Well, it gives you a whole new level of confidence too, because now as a speaker, my mind, the things, and I don't know if it's true for guys. I think in our society, when you're a big dude, I'm not talking for all guys, but when you're a big dude, it's kind of like, oh man, he's a big dude. Mm-hmm. But for women, that's not, in our society, that's not like, oh man, she's a big girl. Nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants the label. And so you mentally spend a lot of energy just thinking about how you look. So especially when you're a speaker on a stage or you want to be a communicator, you're tugging at your shirt, or my pants too tight. Is this going to make me look fat? Well, at 237, everything makes you look heavy. And so, being able just to walk in that freedom where you don't have to think about that anymore, it gives you headspace for other things. Like, how is this message going to give people hope? Mm-hmm. And that's my whole thing in life, is being able to give people hope. Yeah. Because I was so hopeless in several areas of my life. Mm-hmm. And being able to have hope that I can change was like, wow, I didn't have that demarcation, Tim. I didn't have that demarcation date that some other people talk about of, when I came to Christ, before Christ, and then after Christ, after I found Christ. I don't have that. I was a sinner and then I was saved. Mm-hmm. Man, I was saved at the age of, 6 from a life of crime. I mean, what do you have to be saved from when you're 6? Mm-hmm. But there was definitely that that time in my life where the enemy had come in and sown seeds among the wheat. And there was that day of reckoning where God began to, and he says, no, let me do it. Other people tried to come in and pull up the weeds, and it was very destructive for me. Other people who were trying to be helpful would come in and say, you need to do this and you need to do that.
Right.
But the way the Lord does it is so phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because you go to the threshing floor and it hurts, but it's lasting and it works. So that's what I found. Yeah.
Awesome. Very encouraging. Yeah. Well, so you mentioned, you mentioned 12. You mentioned the 12-step program. You mentioned your counselor.
Sure.
There may be others. So I was going to ask you who or what has played a role in shaping. Well, this kind of goes more toward kind of leadership. Let's kind of transition to leadership a little bit.
Definitely.
Who or what has played a role in shaping your vision and understanding of leadership, and why?
Wow. Well, first off, I was raised with a mama who taught me how to read. Who taught me I should say, the love of reading.
Okay.
And so what we would have to do on top of our homework every day, and I think this is maybe just a ploy so that we were out from under her feet, but it worked, is she would have us read for a half an hour on top of our homework every day. So we not only had to do our homework, but then she would say, did you do your reading? And I knew exactly what that meant.
Okay. And
she got us books, and so we would read. I remember at 10 years old, my mom had me read Black Like Me. It was life-changing. And so mama taught me right there. And as a leader, you have to be a reader. And so she taught me that. Daddy taught me how to hustle, boy, and to take risks. So my father's a phenomenal businessman, entrepreneur, has had people believe in him, and had opportunities that were handed to him, and he's taken them. He's like the guy in the Bible that had the 10 talents and brought back a huge return. And so that's my dad. Whatever's been thrown at him, it's just like, if you throw lemons at him, he's going to make the lemonade, he's going to market it, sell it. And he's just phenomenal at that. When I very first started at the office, I also took an internship with a gentleman by the name of Gene Roncone.
Yes.
He was our CDE director at the time. And he is now currently the superintendent of the Rocky Mountain District. Still my friend, still a mentor in my life. I follow him on Facebook religiously. And you talk about a creative genius, that guy. He puts out more content than, sometimes you're just like, dude, I don't even know. Does your head explode on a regular basis, But one of the things that he taught me was that I was creative. And I was working for him. I was probably 22, 23 at the time. And in my family, my sister had always been known as the creative because she was into crafts and she did kind of more artsy type stuff. And, you asked me to do an art project, I used a ruler because, that's just how I'm wired. I love straight lines. Like even as a kid, I would go in and play in my room and I would play paperwork. I mean, how boring is that? But I just loved administrative stuff. And I remember Gene Roncone said to me one day, he goes, Char, no, you don't get it. Everybody's creative. You're creative. And that he said those words, I go, I'm creative. And I had never seen myself as creative before. And so I always, he taught me so much about leadership. There's things even still to this day I go back and I go, wow, Gene taught me that. I would also say my college pastor, Rodney Waters, one of our ministers, he always challenged me to be better. He was constantly challenging me. Constantly. I would talk about something and he would say, well, are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? You're going to talk about it, and he would just frustrate me so much. But he was, I always say we all need a pusher.
Yeah.
And he's always been my pusher. Yeah. Of course, Pastor Brett, he was my mentor when I was youth pastoring, and still remains my mentor, of course. I remember years ago, Kurt Harlow told me, he said, if you ever get an opportunity to work with Pastor Brett Allen, he said, you'll earn a master's in leadership. And it's so true. Yeah. And I'm so honored to be able to do that now. I'll just go into his office and ask him questions. He always has an open door policy. He always believes in giving his staff the best. The best part of him goes to his staff, which is incredible. Sometimes I feel like I need to pay to be here. I can't believe that I get a salary from this, because I'll just go.
Leadership.
I'm telling you right now, I'll just go in and we're just, shooting the breeze. And I'm like, this is a podcast. I always want to secretly record it, because he's just so, his mind is so amazing. And then, of course, Dr. Sam Huddleston, he taught me how to pray as a leader. The power of a consistent prayer life. That's great. The consistent spiritual life of a leader, and then how to treat other people. I mean, he just knows how to honor others. And then for a season, for about 2 or 3 years, I was the admin who sat by the door under Glenn Cole's administration. And the thing I learned from him, which was absolutely powerful, was the power of being a positive leader. I don't know anybody who was more consistently positive day in and day out than him. Literally, even through the seasons when he was going through an illness that he had. There was only one day that I said, "Hey, Brother Cole, how you doing?" He would always call me Charlemagne. He would say, "Charlemagne, I'm doing great today," And at first I was like, man, what's up with this guy? Why can't he just be real with me? Yeah. And then I realized, no, that was really him. He was just one of the most positive people. And the day that he came in, he was ill. He had a sickness. It wasn't communicable or anything like that, but he wasn't feeling well. And I said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "I've had better days." And I was like, wow, that's his bad day. That was his bad day. Right. I've had better days. Wow. But he was still happy. And you're like, can we bottle that up and sell that right there? Yeah. So I've had some incredible leaders that have mentored me. And as you'll notice, most of the list is men. And, they have poured into my life. They haven't been afraid to be a mentor to a female. Yeah. They haven't been afraid to say, "Hey, Char, hey, we're going down for lunch. You want to join us?"
That's great.
They haven't been afraid to make me part of the team. And that's incredible.
Yes, it is.
That is just
definitely a amazing environment to work in all these years.
Man, they believed in me when I didn't believe in myself.
Yeah.
Awesome. So.
Yeah, and of course, mom and dad being the foundation.
Oh,
for you, and that the reading, I love the combination of the reading, and then you have from your mom's side, and then which obviously cultivated a habit that you carry with you to this day.
Yeah. I love to read. I mean, she planted that passion in my heart. Yeah. My mom had a huge passion for always for the underdog. And my mom's always been extremely passionate for different cultures, different ethnicities. And she passed that on to me. She's the one who, I was growing up in Humboldt County, and then we moved later to Fort Bragg. I think, in my high school, there was, 1.5 African-American kids. But my mom always was bringing in things from different cultures. So like, for instance, I grew up listening to tons of Black gospel because mama introduced that to me. Reading books about, the African-American plight. And civil rights, because my mom introduced that to me. Yeah. And so, man, she has just...
so she introduced stuff that it just wasn't fluff. It was...
that I wasn't getting in the culture I was in. Right. I wasn't getting that where I was at. And so she showed that to me. And now I go, wow, it's prepared me so much for... even just the area I live in,
Right, and the people you serve, just diversity.
This district is so diverse that, she really did lay that foundation.
Awesome. Great. So let's talk about going back to just experiences, and maybe this is, I'll put it out there, maybe we've already covered this, maybe not, maybe something else will pop into your mind. But if you could name an experience that God has used to shape you and prepare you for this season, what would it be? Maybe just one, something we haven't.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things, the military has this term, and forgive me if I hope it's not too inappropriate, but they have this term called embrace the suck. Okay. Which is, man, you know what? Lean into that difficulty in life. Just don't run from it. Don't run from those moments when you're like, I don't want to do this. Yeah. Don't run from the hard stuff. It's what's going to make you. And so being able to embrace that. But, also for me, the good side of that is being able, growing up, knowing when I've heard the voice of God. That for me has saved me on so many occasions. He doesn't talk to me in specific ways every single day. When you get a consistent prayer life with the Lord, and when I mean consistent, I mean daily. For years I kind of ran on I called it dating. So for years I dated the Lord. We would go out every once in a while, and a lot of times I would spend the date with the Lord apologizing because I hadn't kept our last date and catching up. Yeah. But when you spend consistent time with the Lord, then now it's a marriage, and it's a different relationship. Right. And so you hear him differently, you see him differently. He's just a consistent that's always with you. And so, knowing when God wakes you up and speaks deliberately to your heart, and I'll never forget it. It was life-changing for me, but I didn't know how it was going to play out. Mm-hmm. It didn't change anything in the moment, but it told me my trajectory was different. I always knew that I was chosen. I just have felt that since I was a kid. I grew up playing, even when I would play as a kid, I would play crusade. Wow. I was speaking and preaching to my stuffed animals and calling them forward and giving them altar calls. And, I was speaking to thousands at 6 years old. It was just communication gift already. My parents had given me a little microphone. And so I was in my room. Anything became a microphone to me. It was just kind of something I did. And I'll never forget, I was, so for years I tried to fit in the local church, and and it was a good thing for me because I love what Erwin McManus says, when you're in the midst of a fog, serving acts like a compass in the midst of the fog. Mm-hmm. If you don't know maybe what your giftings are, if you don't know where the Lord is calling you at a specific time, just get in and serve. Keep serving. And then, just keep serving. It's easier to direct a ship that's out of the harbor.
Just say that again about the compass.
Oh, yeah. Erwin McManus says serving acts as a compass in the midst of the fog.
In the midst of a fog. I think that's so cool because sometimes we feel like we need to hear the voice of the Lord, get direct, some direction.
Yeah. We need to feel led. I've got my hands up in quotes. Yeah.
But what's in front of me to do to serve?
Just put your hand to the plow. And especially, and that's what I tell young people, what should I do? Something. Clean the toilet. Start with something. Start very small because that's setting the pavement on the road. You're laying these pavers down, and so each toilet you clean helps you to get to the next level. Mm-hmm. And so, but I'll never forget, I tried so many different things in the church. I was very, I could stay pretty hidden in the church. I struggled in developing my identity. I was the last born in my family. I struggled at times with failure to launch type thing. And so if I could just be the good little girl who stayed almost in the church, if you let it, will institutionalize you. And so you won't have an identity on your own. You'll have an identity of your performance and what you do. Yeah. And so what I did was kind of like, look at me, I'm the good little girl. I can go and I'll help you with your website. I'll be on your board. I'll do this. I'll help in youth ministry. I remember one time I found myself leading small groups. And I think I became coordinator for small groups just so I wouldn't have to join one, And so I wasn't doing things out of pure motive, but to stay hidden. So I could say I was busy and I was doing things in the kingdom, but I wasn't really being what the Lord was wanting me to be. And I woke up, I was staying at my parents' house, and I woke up in the middle of the night. And especially when you're young and you are woke up in the middle of the night, that's, you should pray. But I thought, man, if I go to sleep right now, I can fall back to sleep. And so I was kind of tinkering with the idea of praying and going back to sleep one out. And so I laid back down and I heard it so loud. It was the loudest I'd ever heard. And it was like, how God can take you through your life in an instant? And I saw myself, I can just even go back right now to the moment, and I saw myself where I had tried to put my hand in all these different areas of ministry, and I was this round peg in a square hole, or a square peg in a round hole, I think is the way you say it. And I just never fit. And I heard these words so loud. He said, I never made you for the church, I made you for the world. And I was like, whoa. Whoa, God has a way of speaking to us that we understand.
Right.
And the next morning I'd forgot about it. And I'll never forget, I was in my parents' kitchen and I was reaching up to get a bowl, a cereal bowl. And again, I heard it because I'd forgot. And I heard it again. It was this confirmation. I never made you for the church. I made you for the world. And I was going through a season of time where I was trying to navigate the church and put my hand in and trying to look what I can do. And I'm, and stay almost in this political, local aspect of the church. And God was saying, no. Char, I have, you're being so myopic right now. I have something so much bigger for you.
Yeah.
Will you let your hand go of what you're trying to fight for and step back and see the bigger picture of what I have for you?
Yeah.
And I still haven't been able to explore what all of that means.
It's still evolving, right?
Yeah, it's still evolving. And at that time, I would have never known. I was toying with the idea of stepping out of the local church and saying, I'm available to speak. And I knew right then it was like the Lord was saying, go and do it. Take the jump. It's okay. And so I was able to do that. And and the ministry began to launch from there.
Love that.
People will come to me and I remember they would say to me, now, Char, do you ask people to go speak different places? I said, I've never asked anyone in my entire life. It was just the doors that began to open out of, the faithfulness and the building of relationships. Just really building relationships just to be friends with people. Yeah. Not to be like, hey, if I become your friend, will you have me come speak? But just being faithful,
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's really in many ways so true for all of us, isn't it? This whole, I've never made you for the church. I made you for the world.
Yeah.
And
And
we do get that tunnel vision, don't we?
Totally.
And just like, where can I position myself or place myself, or how can people notice me to where I can, I can find my place or whatever that looks like. And God is saying, I have so much more.
So much
bigger,
more.
Broader, wider.
This platform is so much bigger.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to prepare you for that. And you're over here, in a little itty bitty sandbox being concerned about how everybody's playing in the sandbox. And no, Char, I don't want you there right now.
I'll take care of that.
Yeah. And so that for me was a very, very foundational in my life. Yeah.
Powerful. Powerful. Well, as we kind of get ready, we're getting ready to wrap up here.
Yes.
It's been just so wonderful to have this conversation with you.
Oh, this has been so much fun.
I know it's going to be encouraging for my listeners, but maybe we can leave them with one more thing. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, man. It turns out way better than you think it's going to turn out.
Oh, that was quick. That didn't. Yeah. You didn't have to think about that too long.
No, it just keeps getting better.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to age. It's getting better with time.
That's good. That's hopeful.
Oh yeah. It just keeps getting better and better. It really does.
And so for for someone out there who may be feeling like they're in a dark place and having a hard time seeing that better thing that's on the horizon.
Yeah.
Any other words of encouragement?
Yeah. Of course, stay on the bus. But begin, I'm kind of even tearing up here. Begin to learn how to encourage yourself in the Lord. Recently I read the book, The Insanity of God. And
just talking to someone else about that the other day. Man. Yeah, amazing.
And the power of being able to encourage yourself in the Lord, that if that's one of the tools that you have to know how to encourage yourself in the Lord if you're going to make it. Because if you're going to make it even during transition, I remember at one point in this transition of going from being an admin, which felt like a huge swing to me, to now leading a bunch of teams. And I remember this moment of feeling like, and I don't know if guys suffer with this, but I think women do maybe even more so, of feeling having to wrestle with feelings of imposter syndrome or not being adequate enough. You'll see this all over, especially in marketed. You're never going to walk into a man cave and he's going to have a sign that says, I am enough. I think maybe dudes they talk to themselves different. I'm not sure, not a guy, so I don't know. But I think women, we tend to be more like, oh, the Lord, I can't believe that I was picked for this position. And maybe, I'm not as qualified as somebody else. And the Lord's going, but wait a second. Yes, you are. I think we don't see all that we bring to the table. And so I just remember one morning feeling so absolutely deflated. And I literally felt the Lord his presence was like, and the only way I can describe it is like when you pump up a tire, it was almost like this tire pump. And with every breath, it was like it breathed into me courage and confidence. And I'm having to realize that for years I was able to rely on my gifting, but now I have to rely on the anointing. And so The Insanity of God is a great book because he talks about the persecuted church a lot, which, really puts everything in a whole different sphere and on a different plane of I have absolutely nothing to complain about. He was talking about in China how that the ministers there call prison seminary, and that the thing that he found that made the Chinese, even over like those who've even over the Muslim population that has suffered in prison, and also the Russian population, Ukrainians that have suffered because of prison, is that the Chinese sang in prison. And not losing that song is so powerful. That Paul and Silas, what do they sang in the midnight hour. And so being able to learn how to sing in the darkness. Man. Oh,
that's
powerful.
Good. Yeah, that's very powerful.
Yeah. Just don't get off the bus and keep singing.
Keep encouraging. Learn to encourage ourselves in the Lord.
Because there's those moments when you don't have a phone a friend.
Right.
That the Holy Spirit is your phone a friend.
Right.
And so, man, that's powerful. Yeah.
It is. Yes. And he is faithful to give us that song in the night when we're at the lowest point or
when you're in that
place.
Dark night of the soul, man, there's nothing like, even times in my own devotions, I have a hymnal and I'll pull it out and I just begin to sing those old songs. And man, they're just, they're not on the top 20, but they're on my top 20.
That's right. Yeah. Well, this is a good place to wrap up our conversation.
Thank you so much, Tim.
To leave our listeners with that word of encouragement. And just thank you so much, Char, for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate it.
What an absolute honor. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. All right. Until next time.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
There were so many great takeaways from this conversation with Char today. Desperation can be a beautiful, freeing thing, resulting in lasting change. And this is another way of saying that transitions, especially those rug-pulled-out transitions, those hard transitions, those forced transitions, have the potential to be transformational. Stay on the bus is another thing that Char reminded us to do. Stay on the bus. The scenery will change. There is reward for faithfulness. And finally, just having that posture of surrender, which says, okay, God, I will walk through this process. I encourage you to reflect on your takeaways today and also share this podcast episode with someone you know who could benefit from it. And finally, if you feel like you have a personal story to tell that would encourage our listeners, we'd love to consider you as a guest on Navigate. So just start by submitting a podcast guest inquiry form using the link provided on the homepage of my website, EncompassLifeCoaching.com, in the podcast section, right on that homepage. So thanks for listening in today. I've been your host, Tim Austin, and I look forward to you joining me on the next episode of Navigate. Catch you later.